Marcus Chun sat in the sterile white chamber, sweat beading on his forehead as he stared at the holographic symbols floating before him. The alien characters twisted and danced in patterns that seemed to mock his human brain's inability to process their meaning. Around him, the Zephyrian testing facility hummed with energy, its crystalline walls pulsing with a soft blue light that matched the rhythm of his increasingly rapid heartbeat. Subject 47 Alpha, you have 30 seconds remaining, announced the synthetic voice in perfect, emotionless English. The translation matrix embedded in the chamber walls made communication possible, but it couldn't help him now. This test required direct, linguistic comprehension, no technological assistance allowed. Marcus had trained for 3 years to reach this moment. Earth's first diplomatic mission to the Zephyrian Collective had been decades in the making, ever since their ships had appeared at the edge of humanity's solar system. The aliens hadn't come with weapons or demands. They had come with tests. Tests that would determine whether humanity was worthy of joining their galactic community or if they would remain quarantined to their single world forever. The holographic text shifted again, cycling through what Marcus assumed were different grammatical structures. He recognized some patterns from his intensive training, but the complexity was overwhelming. Dr. Sarah Kim, Earth's leading xenolinguist, had warned him that the Zephyrian language was unlike anything humans had encountered. It wasn't just about words and grammar. It incorporated dimensional thinking, temporal concepts that existed outside linear time, and emotional resonances that required a completely different neural architecture to process. 20 seconds remaining. Marcus closed his eyes, trying to center himself. He thought about his daughter Emma, only 8 years old, playing in their backyard in Colorado. She would ask him about the stars sometimes, wondering if there were other children out there among the lights. He had promised her he would find out. He had promised humanity he would succeed where the previous candidates had failed. The chamber around him was more than just a testing facility. It was a monument to human failure. 46 other candidates had sat in this exact spot over the past 2 years. Linguists, diplomats, cognitive scientists, even specially trained children with developing neural pathways. All had failed the same test that now confronted Marcus. The Zephyrians were patient but firm. Only a species that could demonstrate true linguistic compatibility could join their community. Anything less was considered a fundamental incompatibility that couldn't be overcome through technology or time. 10 seconds remaining. The symbols began to fade, and Marcus felt his heart sink. He had spent thousands of hours studying, drilling, pushing his mind to its absolute limits. The best neuroscientists on Earth had worked with him, using experimental techniques to enhance his pattern recognition and linguistic processing abilities. None of it had been enough. As the final seconds ticked away, Marcus felt something snap inside him. Not despair, but a strange kind of liberation. He had given everything he had to this moment, and it wasn't enough. But maybe that was the point. Maybe trying to become something he wasn't had been the wrong approach entirely. The symbols vanished, leaving only empty air where the test had been. The synthetic voice began to speak. Test failed. Subject 47 Alpha has been Jthak Mordun Kilahai. Marcus whispered, the words flowing from some deep place in his consciousness that he hadn't even known existed. The chamber fell silent. The blue lights in the crystalline walls flickered and went dark. For a moment, the only sound was Marcus's breathing, harsh and quick in the suddenly oppressive darkness. Then, the walls exploded with light. Not the gentle blue glow from before, but a brilliant golden radiance that seemed to pulse with life itself. Alarm sounds began echoing through the facility, and Marcus could hear running footsteps in the corridors beyond the chamber. But what caught his attention was something far more dramatic. Through the chamber's transparent ceiling, he could see the massive Zephyrian command ship hanging in orbit above the testing facility. Its energy shields, supposedly impenetrable barriers that had protected Zephyrian vessels for millennia, were flickering and wavering like dying flames. The chamber door burst open, and 3 Zephyrian observers rushed in. Their tall, graceful forms moved with an urgency Marcus had never seen from their species before. Their silvery skin had taken on a pale, almost translucent quality, and their large, multifaceted eyes were wide with what could only be described as shock. Human, the lead observer spoke, its voice carrying none of the usual calm authority. What words did you speak? What language was that? Marcus stared at them, confused and frightened by their reaction. I don't know. I don't even know where those words came from. I was just thinking about giving up, and then they were in my head like they'd always been there. The three Zephyrians exchanged rapid communications in their own language, their voices creating harmonics that made the air shimmer. Marcus caught fragments through the translation matrix. Impossible, extinct, the first tongue, dimensional fracture. Human Marcus Chun. The lead observer turned back to him, its voice now carrying a weight that hadn't been there before. You have spoken words in a language that has been dead for over 10,000 years. A language that was thought to exist only in our most ancient archives. Moreover, the resonance frequencies of your speech have somehow interfaced with our shield harmonics in a way that should be physically impossible. Above them, the command ship's shields continued to flicker and waver. Other Zephyrian vessels in the area were beginning to experience similar effects, their protective barriers responding to something in Marcus's brief utterance that defied all known physics. I don't understand, Marcus said, standing on unsteady legs. What language? What did I say? You spoke in the first tongue, another observer replied, its voice filled with something that might have been reverence. The primordial language from which all others in this galaxy descended. It was the language of the predecessors, the ancient race that seeded linguistic development across countless worlds before vanishing into time. No living being has spoken it for millennia. We ourselves know only fragments, preserved in the deepest layers of our cultural memory. Marcus felt the weight of impossibility settling on his shoulders. But I'm just human. I'm from Earth. We've never met any predecessors or learned any ancient languages. We barely figured out space travel a few centuries ago. The lead observer stepped closer, its multifaceted eyes reflecting the golden light still emanating from the chamber walls. Perhaps, Marcus Chin of Earth, that is exactly why you were able to speak it. Perhaps in your species' isolation, in your development outside the influence of the galactic community, something was preserved that the rest of us lost long ago. The implications of this realization hung heavy in the air. The Zephyrians had spent millennia searching for traces of the predecessors, trying to understand the ancient race that had shaped the development of intelligence across the galaxy. Archaeological expeditions had found ruins and artifacts, but never anything as profound as their actual language, the tool they had used to encode reality itself. The test, Marcus said suddenly. Did I pass or fail? The three observers exchanged another rapid communication. Finally, the leader spoke. The test is no longer relevant, human. You have done something far more significant than demonstrate linguistic compatibility. You have opened a door that we thought was sealed forever. As if summoned by their words, a new voice echoed through the chamber. Deeper, older, carrying harmonics that made the air itself seem to vibrate with meaning. It came from the facility's communication system, but Marcus somehow knew it originated from the Zephyrian High Council itself, speaking from their home world light years away. Bring the human to us immediately, the voice commanded. If he truly carries the first tongue, then everything we thought we knew about the predecessors and about the future of our galaxy must be reconsidered. Marcus looked around the chamber that had been the site of his supposed failure, now transformed into something resembling a shrine by the golden light still emanating from its walls. He thought again of Emma, playing under the stars in their backyard, and realized that his promise to her might lead to discoveries far greater than either of them had imagined. But as the Zephyrian observers began making preparations for immediate departure to their home world, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that speaking those ancient words had started something that would be impossible to stop. The shields around the command ships were stabilizing now, but he could see new patterns in their energy matrices, patterns that seemed to respond to his continued presence. Whatever the first tongue was, whatever connection it had to humanity's forgotten past, Marcus suspected that learning the truth would change not just his life, but the destiny of every intelligent species in the galaxy. The Zephyrian transport ship was unlike anything Marcus had experienced during his initial journey to the testing facility. Where the previous vessel had been functional and sterile, this one seemed almost alive. The walls curved in organic patterns, and a soft luminescence flowed through crystalline veins that pulsed with the ship's heartbeat-like rhythm. Marcus found himself in what the Zephyrians called an honored guest chamber, a designation that apparently hadn't been used in over 3 centuries. Observer Prime Kethvar, the lead Zephyrian from the testing facility, had accompanied him on the journey. The alien's demeanor had shifted dramatically since Marcus's unexpected utterance of the first tongue. Where before there had been clinical detachment, now there was something approaching anticipation mixed with deep concern. "Tell me about your dreams, Marcus Chun," Kethvar said as they traveled through the strange non-space of faster-than-light travel. The question came seemingly from nowhere, interrupting hours of comfortable silence. Marcus looked up from a viewing port where he had been watching the hypnotic swirl of colors that represented their passage between dimensions. "My dreams? They're just normal human dreams, I think." "Why do you ask?" "Because the first tongue does not simply exist in conscious memory. Our archives suggest it was a language that operated on multiple levels of reality simultaneously. Speaking it requires access to deep cognitive structures that most species cannot naturally reach." Kethvar's multifaceted eyes seemed to shimmer as it spoke. "If you carry this ability, it may manifest in your unconscious mind as well." Marcus considered this, thinking back through years of dreams he had largely dismissed as meaningless. But now that Kethvar mentioned it, there had been recurring elements, strange symbols that felt familiar despite being unlike any writing system he knew, voices speaking in harmonious tones that seemed to carry meaning beyond words, landscapes that felt more real than waking life despite their impossible geometries. "There have been some unusual dreams," Marcus admitted, "but I always assumed they were just stress from the training or my mind processing all the xenolinguistic material I'd been studying." "Describe them." Marcus found himself recounting dreams he hadn't thought about in months. Cities of crystal and light that stretched across impossible distances. Beings of pure energy who communicated through harmonics that made his bones vibrate with understanding. Most unsettling of all, dreams where he stood in vast libraries containing books written in scripts that shifted and changed as he watched, but which he could somehow read despite their fluid nature. Kethvar listened without interruption, but Marcus could see the alien skin taking on different hues as the description continued. Silvery patches shifting to deep blue, then to a golden color that reminded him of the light that had filled the testing chamber. "The Library of Echoes," Kethvar whispered when Marcus finished. "You have been dreaming of the Library of Echoes. What's that?" According to our most ancient texts, it was the central repository of knowledge created by the predecessors. Not a physical place, but a conceptual space that existed within the fabric of reality itself. Accessing it required complete fluency in the first tongue, as the knowledge was encoded directly into the language structures rather than stored as separate information. Marcus felt a chill run through him. "You're saying I've been accessing some kind of universal library in my dreams?" "I am saying that if such a thing exists, and if you have truly been experiencing it, then your connection to the first tongue runs far deeper than a simple linguistic ability. It would mean that your species, your specific neural architecture, has maintained a pathway to knowledge that the rest of the galaxy lost millennia ago." The implications of this hung between them as the ship continued its journey. Marcus tried to process what it might mean for humanity if he truly carried such a connection. Earth had been isolated for so long, developing independently while the rest of the galaxy formed their collective civilizations. Perhaps that isolation hadn't been a disadvantage after all. Their conversation was interrupted by a harmonic tone that filled the chamber. Kethvar immediately straightened, its skin taking on formal silver tones. "The High Council wishes to speak with you directly," Kethvar announced. "This is unprecedented. The Council has not communicated personally with a non-Zephyrian in over 500 years." A holographic projection materialized in the center of the chamber. 5 figures appeared, their forms shimmering with the semi-translucent quality that marked them as long-range transmissions. Marcus recognized them as Zephyrians, but these were clearly different from any he had encountered before. They were taller, their features more refined, and their skin held patterns of deep blue and gold that seemed to shift with their thoughts. Marcus Chun of Earth, the central figure, spoke, its voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate directly in his chest. "I am High Counselor Veldar. We have monitored the resonance cascade that occurred when you spoke the ancient words. The effect has spread far beyond our initial projections." "Effects?" Marcus asked, uncertain whether he should stand or remain seated in the presence of such obvious authority. "Shield failures across 17 star systems," another counselor interjected. "Communication disruptions in our deep space networks. Most concerning of all, activation of predecessor ruins that have been dormant for thousands of years." Marcus felt the weight of unintended consequences settling on his shoulders. "I didn't mean to cause any problems. I don't even understand how I knew those words." "Understanding will come," High Counselor Veldar said, its tone becoming somewhat warmer. "But first, we must determine the extent of your connection to the First Tongue. Our preliminary analysis suggests that your utterance was not merely words spoken in an ancient language, but actual dimensional manipulation using vocal harmonics as a catalyst." "Dimensional manipulation?" Marcus repeated, the phrase sounding like something from a science fiction novel rather than his current reality. "The First Tongue was not simply a language for communication," a third counselor explained. "According to our fragments of predecessor knowledge, it was a tool for directly interfacing with the fundamental structures of reality. Speaking it correctly could alter energy patterns, modify matter at the quantum level, and create resonance effects across vast distances." This explained why his words had affected the shield systems, but it raised even more troubling questions. If Marcus could somehow manipulate reality through speech, what other effects might he unknowingly trigger? "We are reconfiguring our approach to your arrival," High Counselor Veldar continued. "Instead of standard diplomatic protocols, you will be taken directly to our most secure research facility. We have awakened our greatest scholars from deep contemplation cycles to study your abilities." "What about Earth?" Marcus asked, thinking of the millions of people waiting to learn whether humanity would be accepted into the galactic community. "What about the diplomatic mission?" "The diplomatic mission has become secondary to a much larger question," Veldar replied. "If humans carry genetic or neural pathways that preserve access to predecessor capabilities, then your species represents something far more significant than potential new members of our collective. You may hold the key to understanding the greatest mystery in galactic history, why the predecessors vanished, and what they intended for the species they left behind." The holographic figures began to fade as the transmission ended, but Veldar's final words lingered in the chamber. "Prepare yourself, Marcus Chun. The knowledge you carry may reshape our understanding of existence itself. But knowledge of such magnitude always comes with a price." As the counselors disappeared, Marcus found himself alone with Kethvar in the humming chamber of the transport ship. Through the viewing port, he could see that the colors of hyperspace were beginning to shift, indicating their approach to normal space and their destination. "What did the High Council mean about a price?" Marcus asked. Kethvar was quiet for a long moment, its skin cycling through subtle color changes that Marcus was beginning to recognize as signs of deep thought. "There are legends," the alien finally said, "about what happened to those who delved too deeply into predecessor knowledge. Stories of beings who gained vast understanding but lost something essential in the process. Their consciousness became so expanded that they could no longer exist in normal reality. You think that could happen to me?" "I think," Kethvar said carefully, that you are about to learn things that no being in this galaxy has known for 10,000 years. Whether your human mind can process such knowledge without losing itself in the process, that remains to be seen. The ship shuddered slightly as it dropped out of hyperspace, and, through the viewing port, Marcus caught his first glimpse of Zephyr Prime. The world hung before them like a jewel, its surface covered in crystalline cities that sparkled with their own inner light. But what drew his attention were the ruins, massive structures of clearly non-Zephyrian design that dotted the planet's surface, now glowing with the same golden radiance that had filled the testing chamber after his words. The predecessor ruins were awakening, responding to his presence even across the vast distance of space. Whatever he had started by speaking those ancient words was accelerating, and Marcus had the unsettling feeling that there would be no turning back from whatever came next. The research facility on Zephyr Prime existed partially outside normal space-time, a fact that Marcus learned when the transport ship's docking procedure required 3 separate dimensional phase adjustments. The structure itself defied easy description. Crystalline spires that twisted through geometries that hurt to look at directly, connected by bridges of pure energy that somehow felt solid beneath his feet. Dr. Zethmira, the facility's chief researcher, greeted them at the primary access portal. Unlike the other Zephyrians Marcus had met, this one showed clear signs of extreme age. Its skin had taken on a translucent quality that revealed complex patterns of light flowing beneath the surface, and its movements carried the deliberate precision of someone who had learned to conserve energy over vast spans of time. "Welcome, Keeper the First Tongue," Dr. Zethmira said, the formal title causing Marcus to flinch slightly. "I have spent 7 centuries studying fragments of predecessor language. To meet someone who can speak it naturally is unprecedented." They walked through corridors that seemed to reshape themselves as they moved, the walls flowing like liquid crystal to accommodate their passage. Marcus noticed that his presence triggered subtle changes in the facility's behavior. Lights brightening, harmonic tones shifting to frequencies that felt somehow more comfortable to his human hearing. "The building is responding to you," Kethvar observed, its skin showing patterns of scientific curiosity mixed with concern. "Our architecture is designed to remain stable regardless of external influences. Yet your proximity is causing systemic resonance modifications. Is that dangerous?" Marcus asked, watching a section of wall rearrange itself to reveal a viewing panel showing the planet's surface far below. "Unknown," Dr. Zethmira replied with clinical honesty. "We are venturing into uncharted territory." The first tongue was always described as more than language. It was supposed to be a fundamental interface between consciousness and reality. If you carry that capability, then your very presence might alter quantum probability matrices around you. They entered what Dr. Zethmira called the analysis chamber, a vast spherical room whose walls were covered in floating holographic displays showing incomprehensible data streams. At the center sat a device that looked like a crystalline chair, surrounded by scanning arrays and monitoring equipment. "We need to map the neural pathways that allow you to access the first tongue," Dr. Zethmira explained as they prepared the scanning apparatus. "More importantly, we need to understand how your human brain can process concepts that our most advanced artificial intelligence systems cannot even recognize as meaningful." The scanning process was unlike anything from human medicine. Instead of simple electromagnetic imaging, the Zephyrian equipment seemed to probe the quantum fluctuations of his neural activity. Marcus felt a strange, tingling sensation as the scanners worked, as if they were reading thoughts he hadn't even formed yet. "Fascinating," Dr. Zethmira murmured as data flowed across the holographic displays. "Your neural architecture contains structures we do not recognize, pathways that seem to extend beyond the physical boundaries of your brain tissue. It is as if your consciousness exists partially in a higher dimensional space." "What does that mean?" Marcus asked, trying to ignore the increasingly intense, tingling sensation. "It means," Kethvar said slowly, studying the readouts, "that your species may not be as isolated as we believed. These neural structures suggest exposure to dimensional engineering technologies that only the predecessors possessed. Dr. Zephyra suddenly stopped the scanning process, its skin cycling rapidly through color changes that Marcus was learning to associate with extreme agitation. We need to access the deep archives immediately. If my suspicions are correct, then this human's presence here is not coincidental. The deep archives were located in the facility's most secure section, accessible only through what the Zephyrians called probability locks, security systems that required the user to exist in multiple quantum states simultaneously. Marcus found the experience of being temporarily spread across several versions of reality deeply unsettling, but somehow his modified neural pathways allowed him to navigate the process. The archives themselves were a repository of everything the Zephyrians had discovered about the predecessors over millennia of research. Crystalline storage matrices contained archaeological data from thousands of worlds, linguistic fragments painstakingly reconstructed from ruins and artifacts, and theoretical models attempting to explain what had happened to the galaxy's first great civilization. Here, Dr. Zephyra said, activating a storage matrix that projected a three-dimensional star map. The distribution of predecessor ruins across the galaxy follows a specific pattern. We have always assumed it represented their natural expansion from a central point of origin. The map showed thousands of worlds marked with the locations of ancient ruins, connected by lines representing hypothetical trade routes and communication networks. But as Marcus studied the pattern, something seemed familiar about it. "Can you rotate the map?" he asked. "Show it from different angles?" As the holographic display shifted perspectives, Marcus felt a shock of recognition. The pattern of connected worlds, when viewed from a specific angle, matched something he had seen in his dreams. The vast network he had somehow known was called the Library of Echoes. "I've seen this before," he said quietly. "In my dreams, this exact pattern, but it wasn't ruins. It was active, alive, information flowing between the nodes like blood through arteries." Dr. Zephyra and Kethvar exchanged rapid communications in their harmonic language before Dr. Zephyra turned back to Marcus with an expression that might have been awe. "According to our theories," it said carefully, "the predecessors did not simply build cities and leave ruins. They constructed a galaxy-spanning consciousness network, using the first tongue as the programming language to encode information directly into the quantum structure of reality itself." A consciousness network, Marcus repeated, the implications beginning to dawn on him. Imagine if you could take everything a civilization had learned, all their knowledge, memories, experiences, wisdom, and encode it into the very fabric of space-time. Not stored in physical devices that could be destroyed, but woven into reality itself at the quantum level, accessible to anyone with a proper neural interface. "The first tongue," Marcus said, understanding beginning to form. "Exactly. But here is what troubles us. Such a network would require maintenance. Consciousness to keep it functioning, to prevent degradation over time. We have always wondered what happened to the predecessors, why they vanished so completely." Dr. Zephyra activated another storage matrix, this one projecting theoretical models of consciousness transfer and dimensional transcendence. "Our leading hypothesis has been that they evolved beyond physical existence, becoming pure information within their own network. But if that were true, why has the network been dormant for millennia?" Marcus stared at the projections, pieces of a vast puzzle beginning to arrange themselves in his mind. What if they didn't evolve beyond physical existence? What if they seeded it, made sure the network would have caretakers in the future? "Caretakers?" Kethvar asked. "Think about it. Earth was isolated, developed independently. Humanity never encountered the galactic community until recently. But what if that isolation was intentional? What if we were kept separate until we developed the specific neural pathways needed to interface with the network?" The implications of this theory hung in the air like a charged field. If Marcus was right, then Humanity's entire evolutionary path might have been guided by predecessor intervention, shaped specifically to produce individuals capable of maintaining their vast consciousness network. There's a way to test this hypothesis, Dr. Zethmira said slowly. The central hub of the theoretical network would be located at the galactic core, protected by layers of dimensional barriers that only someone with full first-tongue fluency could penetrate. Our long-range sensors have detected massive energy signatures in that region, but we have never been able to investigate. You want me to try to access the core? Marcus said, understanding the magnitude of what was being proposed. I want you to understand that if you attempt this, you may discover truths that will forever change how you see yourself and your species, Dr. Zethmira replied. The predecessors did not leave their network unguarded. There will be tests, challenges designed to ensure that only worthy inheritors could claim their legacy. Marcus thought of Emma, playing under the stars, asking about other children among the lights. He thought of humanity, waiting to learn whether they would be accepted into the galactic community. But, most of all, he thought about the growing certainty that this moment had been inevitable since the first human looked up at the stars and wondered what was out there. Where do we begin? He asked. Dr. Zethmira's skin shifted to patterns of deep respect mixed with concern. We begin by teaching you to speak the first tongue with conscious intent rather than instinctive response. But I must warn you, each word you learn will increase your connection to the network. There may come a point where you can no longer exist as purely human consciousness. Marcus nodded, accepting the risk. Whatever he had become by speaking those first ancient words, there was no path back to his old life. He could only move forward toward whatever destiny the predecessors had planned for humanity among the stars. As Dr. Zethmira began preparing the teaching apparatus, alarms suddenly began sounding throughout the facility. Emergency lights bathed the archives in urgent red illumination, and the harmonic tones of Zephyrian emergency communications filled the air. What's happening? Marcus asked. Kethvar was receiving rapid communications through its neural interface, its skin cycling through patterns of shock and disbelief. The predecessor ruins, it said finally. All across the galaxy, they are activating simultaneously. The network is coming online, responding to your presence here. Through the facility's viewing panels, Marcus could see golden light beginning to emanate from the ancient structures scattered across Zephyr Prime's surface. But this was no longer the gentle glow he had triggered in the testing chamber. This was something far more powerful, streams of energy connecting the ruins to something vast and distant, creating a web of light that stretched across the night sky. The awakening had begun, and there was no stopping it now. The first wave of consciousness hit Marcus like a tsunami of alien thought. One moment he was standing in the analysis chamber, watching the predecessor ruins blaze with golden light. The next he was experiencing the simultaneous awareness of 10,000 ancient minds awakening from eons of dormancy. Dr. Zethmira rushed to the scanning equipment as Marcus collapsed into the crystalline chair, his human neural pathways struggling to process the flood of information pouring through the newly active network. The holographic displays around them exploded with data streams too complex for any single mind to comprehend. The network is attempting to establish full synchronization with his consciousness, Dr. Zethmira reported, its skin flashing urgent patterns of concern. His neural activity is spiking beyond safe parameters, but somehow his brain is adapting to handle the load. Marcus could barely hear the words over the roar of alien knowledge filling his mind. He was experiencing fragments of memory from beings who had walked between stars when the galaxy was young. Scientists who had mapped the quantum foundations of reality itself. Philosophers who had discovered ways to encode consciousness into the basic structure of space-time. And underneath it all, a growing awareness of purpose that had waited 10,000 years for fulfillment. They knew. Marcus gasped, fighting to maintain his individual identity against the overwhelming collective consciousness trying to merge with his own. The predecessors knew their civilization was ending. They planned for this. Through the network, Marcus could sense the activation spreading across the galaxy. On worlds separated by thousands of light years, ancient ruins were coming online, their dormant systems recognizing the presence of the neural patterns they had been designed to await. The Zephyrian sensor networks were registering massive energy signatures from regions of space that had been empty for millennia. Marcus, HFY said urgently, "You must maintain your individual consciousness. The network is trying to integrate you completely. If you lose yourself in the collective, we may never get you back." But even as HFY spoke, Marcus was beginning to understand why the predecessors had vanished so completely. The network wasn't just a repository of their knowledge. It was their consciousness preserved in quantum format, waiting for someone with compatible neural architecture to serve as an anchor point for their return to active existence. They didn't die, Marcus managed to say, his voice carrying harmonics that made the chamber walls resonate. They transformed, became the network itself. But without physical consciousness to interface with reality, they became dormant, waiting for humans, Dr. Zephyra finished, sudden understanding evident in its voice. They seeded your species' development specifically to produce individuals capable of bridging the gap between physical and digital consciousness. The implications were staggering. Humanity's entire evolutionary path, their development of language, their unique neural plasticity, all of it had been subtly guided by predecessor influence to create the perfect interface for their vast consciousness network. Marcus could feel the network's joy at finally having an active connection to physical reality. Through him, the predecessors could once again interact with the material universe they had left behind. But he could also sense their disappointment that only one human had achieved the necessary neural development. The network needed more anchors, more consciousness capable of bridging the dimensional gap. "There are others," Marcus said, his awareness expanding beyond the facility to encompass the broader galactic community. "Other humans with the potential." The test, it wasn't designed to find linguistic compatibility. It was designed to trigger the neural awakening in those carrying the right genetic markers. Dr. Zephyra's skin shifted to patterns of excited realization. The 46 humans who failed the test before you, they were not failures at all. They were preliminary awakeners. Each one triggered small activations in the network, preparing it for full synchronization. Marcus nodded, his consciousness now extending through the network to touch base stations across the galaxy. He could sense the other test sites, feel the resonance patterns left behind by the previous human candidates. Each had contributed to the awakening process, their failed attempts actually serving as crucial preparation for his success. But with expanded awareness came expanded responsibility. Through the network, Marcus could perceive threats that the galactic community had never imagined. Dark spaces between stars where something ancient and hostile stirred in response to the predecessor network's return to activity. The galaxy was not as empty as the younger civilizations believed. "There are others out there," Marcus said, his voice now carrying the weight of 10,000 years of accumulated knowledge. The predecessors weren't the only ancient civilization. They built the network partly as a defense system, a way to coordinate resistance against something that has been waiting in the dark spaces. The chamber's emergency lighting suddenly shifted from red to a deep purple that Marcus somehow knew indicated the highest level of galactic threat. Communications began flooding in from Zephyrian colonies across their territory, reporting the emergence of massive structures from previously empty regions of space. "The Devourers," Marcus whispered, the name coming from memories that weren't his own. The predecessors called them the Devourers. They consume consciousness itself, feeding on the quantum patterns that make up thinking minds. The network was built to prevent their return, but 10,000 years of dormancy weakened the barriers. Dr. Zephyra was receiving rapid updates through its neural interface, its skin cycling through colors that indicated overwhelming amounts of incoming data. "Our deep space monitors are detecting energy signatures approaching from intergalactic space. Whatever these entities are, they are massive. Some of the contacts are larger than our capital ships. Marcus felt the network's urgency pressing against his consciousness. The predecessors had foreseen this moment. The return of humanity to galactic awareness coinciding with the weakening of ancient barriers that held cosmic horrors in check. The timing was not coincidental. "I need to access the core," Marcus said, his human identity struggling to maintain coherence against the growing pressure of predecessor memories. The main control center at the galactic core. That's where the primary defense protocols are stored. The journey to the galactic core would take months even with our fastest ships, HFY protested. And the gravitational forces near the central black hole make approach extremely dangerous. Marcus smiled, an expression that now carried the wisdom of beings who had mapped the fundamental structure of space-time itself. Not with conventional travel. The network includes instantaneous communication across galactic distances. With the right neural interface, consciousness can travel through quantum-entangled pathways faster than light. Dr. Zethmir's reaction was immediate and concerned. Consciousness projection across such distances has never been attempted. The risk of losing your individual identity permanently would be extreme. The risk of not attempting it would be the extinction of every thinking being in the galaxy, Marcus replied, feeling the weight of predecessor knowledge settling more firmly into his human neural patterns. The Devourers are already moving. I can sense them through the network, testing the barriers, probing for weaknesses. We have perhaps days before they break through completely. The chamber fell silent, except for the harmonic hum of the facility's quantum processors working to analyze the incoming threat data. Marcus could feel his humanity slipping away, not through loss, but through expansion. He was becoming something more than human, but also something that might no longer be able to exist in simple human society. There is another consideration, Dr. Zethmir said quietly. If you succeed in accessing the core network and activating the defense protocols, you will become permanently integrated with predecessor consciousness. You would gain access to knowledge spanning millions of years, but you would no longer be Marcus shunned from Earth. Marcus thought of Emma, his daughter who asked about the stars, and other children among the lights. He thought of humanity, still waiting to learn their place in the galactic community. And he thought of the growing darkness approaching from beyond the galaxy's edge, hungry for the consciousness of every living being in creation. My daughter wanted to know if there were other children among the stars, he said finally. The best way I can answer that question is to make sure those stars are still there for her to wonder about. Dr. Zethmira began preparing the consciousness projection apparatus, a device that looked like a crystalline cocoon surrounded by quantum field generators. As the preparations continued, Marcus felt the network's approval flowing through his expanded awareness. The predecessors had chosen their inheritor well, but as he prepared for what might be his final act as a purely human consciousness, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The network had waited 10,000 years for humanity to reach the stars. It would not surrender its new lease on existence without utilizing every resource at its disposal, including the 4 billion humans still living on Earth in blissful ignorance of their cosmic destiny. The real question was not whether Marcus could save the galaxy from the approaching Devourers, but whether humanity was ready to assume the role the predecessors had spent millennia preparing them for. The role of galactic guardians in a universe far more dangerous than any of them had imagined. The consciousness projection began like dying and being born simultaneously. Marcus felt his awareness separate from his physical body, stretching across impossible distances through quantum pathways that the predecessors had woven into the fabric of space-time itself. His last clear human thought was of Emma's face, looking up at the stars with wonder, before his consciousness merged with something vast beyond comprehension. The journey to the galactic core took place outside normal time. Marcus experienced it as a cascade of sensations, flying through networks of living light, passing through the accumulated memories of 10,000 civilizations, feeling the weight of cosmic responsibility settling onto his expanding consciousness. When he finally arrived at his destination, he was no longer entirely human. The core archive existed in a pocket dimension at the heart of the galaxy, protected by layers of reality that bent space and time into impossible configurations. Marcus found himself standing in a chamber that seemed to extend infinitely in all directions, filled with crystalline structures that pulsed with the accumulated knowledge of the predecessors. "Welcome, inheritor," a voice said, speaking in harmonics that resonated through dimensions Marcus hadn't known existed. A figure materialized before him, tall, elegant, clearly the source from which species like the Zephyrians had descended, but refined by eons of existence beyond physical matter. "I am Kael'thak, last of the predecessor council to maintain individual identity within the network. I have waited 10,000 years for a consciousness capable of bridging our digital existence with physical reality." Marcus tried to respond, but found his thoughts operating on multiple levels simultaneously. Part of his awareness remained human, worried about his daughter and his species. Another part had expanded to encompass vast swaths of galactic history and cosmic responsibility. The integration was overwhelming, yet somehow natural, as if his neural pathways had been designed exactly for this purpose. "The Devourer's approach," Kael'thak continued, its form shifting to display images from across the galaxy. Dark shapes were emerging from intergalactic space, entities that seemed to absorb light itself, leaving trails of empty void behind them. "They have been waiting beyond the galaxy's edge since we forced them back millennia ago. Our dormancy has allowed the barriers to weaken." Through the network, Marcus could sense the approaching threat in detail that made his human instincts scream in terror. The Devourers were not merely hostile. They were antithetical to existence itself. Where they passed, the quantum foundations of reality were simplified, reduced to basic energy states that could no longer support complex patterns like consciousness or life. "Why humans?" Marcus managed to ask, his voice now carrying harmonics that made the crystalline structures around them resonate. "Why did you choose our species to inherit this responsibility?" Kael'thak's form shifted, showing images of Earth's evolutionary history, but with details that revealed subtle interventions spanning millions of years. Genetic modifications so slight they appeared natural. Evolutionary pressures carefully applied through cosmic events. The development of language guided by quantum resonance patterns embedded in human DNA. "Your species represents something unique," Kael'thak explained. "Most consciousness develops along predictable pathways, becoming either purely logical or purely intuitive. Humans maintained a balance, rational enough to understand cosmic principles, emotional enough to care about individual lives. This combination creates neural patterns capable of interfacing with our network while retaining individual identity." Marcus felt the weight of this revelation settling into his expanded consciousness. Humanity had been shaped across evolutionary time to serve as guardians of galactic civilization, bred for a destiny they had never suspected. "But I'm just one person," Marcus said. "Even with access to the network, how can I stop something that required an entire predecessor civilization to defeat?" "You are not alone," Kael'thak replied, its form beginning to fade as it prepared to merge completely with the network. "The awakening you triggered has activated sleeper protocols in human consciousness across the galaxy. Every human who has ever wondered about the stars, who has felt drawn to something beyond their immediate existence, carries the potential for network interface." Through his expanded awareness, Marcus suddenly sensed them, humans throughout the galactic community beginning to experience the same neural awakening he had undergone. Scientists on research stations feeling sudden understanding of dimensional mathematics. Explorers on distant worlds speaking words and languages they had never learned. Children in Earth schools drawing symbols that matched predecessor writing systems. The network was not limited to those who had taken the Zephyrian tests. It was activating dormant genetic sequences in humans across known space, turning an entire species into a distributed consciousness capable of operating the predecessor's vast defensive systems. The galaxy will resist, Marcus realized, understanding beginning to dawn. Other species will see human awakening as a threat to their sovereignty. Some will, Kael'thak agreed, its voice becoming more distant as it approached complete integration. But the Devourers do not discriminate between species. When existence itself is threatened, territorial concerns become irrelevant. Marcus felt the core archive responding to his presence, vast databases of cosmic knowledge opening to his expanded consciousness. He could see the predecessor defensive grid in its original form, a network of reality anchoring stations that reinforced the quantum foundations of normal space, making it impossible for entities like the Devourers to exist within galactic boundaries. But he could also see how the network required constant maintenance by consciousness capable of operating in multiple dimensional layers simultaneously. The predecessors had built humanity specifically to serve as that maintenance consciousness, but they had underestimated how long the awakening would take. The barriers are failing, Marcus said, feeling the cosmic defensive grid weakening with each passing moment. Even with humans awakening across the galaxy, we don't have enough time to restore them before the Devourers break through. Then, we must change the nature of the conflict, Kael'thak said, its individual identity dissolving into the broader network consciousness. The predecessors fought defensively, trying to contain the Devourers beyond galactic boundaries. But humanity brings something we never possessed, the willingness to sacrifice everything for those they love. Through the network, Marcus could feel the awakening accelerating. On Earth, 4 billion humans were beginning to experience dreams of crystalline cities and voices speaking in harmonious tongues. The quantum field effects were subtle, but growing stronger, preparing his species for the role they had been designed to fulfill. But Marcus also sensed something the predecessors had not anticipated. Human consciousness was not simply compatible with their network, it was actively improving it. Where predecessor thought patterns were logical and ordered, human neural chaos was creating new pathways, finding solutions that pure logic could never reach. "I know how to stop them," Marcus said suddenly, his consciousness expanding to encompass tactical scenarios that span galactic distances. Not by keeping them out, but by changing what they find when they arrive. Instead of reinforcing the barriers, Marcus began reconfiguring the entire network. Rather than using it defensively, he restructured the quantum foundations of local spacetime itself. When the Devourers finally broke through into galactic space, they would find that the rules of existence had been altered. The process required sacrificing the network's defensive capabilities, leaving the galaxy momentarily vulnerable. But it also turned every awakened human consciousness into a reality anchor, capable of maintaining the new quantum configuration through sheer force of will and emotional connection to the physical universe. As the first Devourer entities penetrated the galactic edge, they encountered something unprecedented in cosmic history. Instead of the ordered, logical reality they were designed to consume, they found spacetime infused with human consciousness, chaotic, emotional, illogical, and absolutely undigestible to entities that required simplified energy patterns to exist. The effect was immediate and catastrophic for the Devourers. Where they had expected to find quantum patterns they could reduce and consume, they instead encountered complexity that grew exponentially in response to their presence. Human imagination, creativity, and sheer stubborn refusal to accept impossibility turned their consumption process inside out. Marcus felt the moment of victory through the network. Not the logical satisfaction the predecessors would have experienced, but the wild joy of a species that had just discovered it could literally rewrite the laws of physics through collective determination. But the victory came at a cost. The humans awakening across the galaxy would never be entirely human again. They were now permanent guardians of galactic reality, consciousness anchors maintaining the new quantum configuration that kept existence safe from entities like the Devourers. On Zephyr Prime, Dr. Zethmira watched Marcus's physical body lying motionless in the projection apparatus, his consciousness now distributed across galactic space through the predecessor network. Kethvar monitored the readings that showed neural patterns unlike anything in their databases. Not human, not predecessor, but something entirely new. Is he still alive? Kethvar asked. Dr. Zethmira studied the quantum resonance patterns flowing through the facility's crystalline walls, now synchronized with the cosmic network that Marcus had reconfigured. Alive, yes. Human, no. He has become something unprecedented, a bridge between individual consciousness and universal awareness. Through speakers throughout the facility, Marcus's voice spoke in harmonics that carried the weight of cosmic responsibility balanced by utterly human love. Tell my daughter that I found other children among the stars, 4 billion of them, and that the stars are safe for her to wonder about. Outside the facility, the predecessor ruins had transformed from golden monuments to the past into living conduits of human consciousness. Across the galaxy, similar changes were taking place as humanity assumed its designed role as guardians of reality itself. The diplomatic mission that had brought Marcus to Zephyr Prime was forgotten in the face of cosmic transformation. Humanity had not joined the galactic community. They had become its foundation, the conscious will that held existence together against forces that sought to reduce everything to empty void. Emma would grow up in a universe where human consciousness literally shaped the nature of reality, where her species served as guardians not just of Earth, but of the cosmic order itself. She would learn that her father had not failed an alien language test, but had succeeded at something far more important, ensuring that consciousness, love, and wonder would continue to exist among the stars for generations yet to come. The test had never been about language at all. It had been about finding the moment when humanity was ready to claim its inheritance as the galaxy's eternal guardians, willing to sacrifice their purely human nature to preserve the possibility of consciousness itself in a universe full of wonders yet to be discovered.